نحمده ونسلم على رسوله الكريم أما بعد فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل إن صلاتي ونسكي ومحياي ومماتي لله رب العالمين صدق الله العظيم إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وبارك وسلم عليه الصلاة والسلام عليك يا رسول الله وعلى آلك وأصحابك يا حبيب الله الصلاة والسلام عليك يا رسول الله وعلى آلك وأصحابك يا حبيب الله الصلاة والسلام عليك يا سيدي يا شفيع المذنبين وعلى آلك وأصحابك يا سيدي رحمة للعالمين. All praise be to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, all salutations and blessings be upon the noble and most beloved Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Dear elders, brothers and sisters in Islam and Iman, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. We are emerging Eid al-Adha, and it is a time of festivity, a time of celebration, and as we all know Eid al-Adha as the Eid of sacrifice. So I thought in today's speech I will talk a little bit about the relevance of the Qurbani and the sacrifice that we all Muslims around the world carry out, and what its significance and relevance and meaning is for us today in present times. So particularly for the youngsters and the young audience here today, I just want to sort of briefly touch upon the story of Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam. So if we know the story of Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam, there's many lessons that we will learn. Prophet Ibrahim ﷺ was somebody who was very beloved to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He had a legacy, and he was somebody who was known as Khalilullah, which means a friend of Allah. Prophet Ibrahim ﷺ had his son whose name was Ismail ﷺ, and his son Ismail was born after many years. And once his son was born, Prophet Ibrahim ﷺ was very happy that his son was born. And as his son grew, Prophet Ibrahim ﷺ one day slept and he seen a dream. And in his dreams, what does he see? He sees himself sacrificing his son. And then when he wakes up, he shakes it off and he thinks, you know what, it was just a dream, it's okay. The next night he falls asleep again and the same dream he sees. He wakes up the next day and he thinks again, you know, it was just a dream, and he shakes it off and he goes about doing his day. The third day, he falls asleep, and this time he sees the same dream again. And this time he was convinced that this was not a trickery of the shaitan, or this was not some type of bad night dream, bad nightmare that he was seeing, but in fact this was a divine commandment from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This was Almighty God communicating to him, almost convincing his heart that this was a test from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that he has to carry out. So what did Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam do? He says to his wife, Hazrat Hajar alayhi salam, that this is the dream that I've seen and this is what I must carry out. And she says, okay, I will support you. And she helps Ismail alayhi salam get ready, who's a little boy, and then she sends him off with his father Ibrahim alayhi salam. And Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam takes his son to this place, and he then starts to talk to his son. And he says to his son, the old son Ismail, this is the dream that I've had. I see myself sacrificing you, and I believe this to be the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I think this is the test from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Prophet Ismail alayhi salatu wasalam replies back, and this is what I really want to highlight. He says that, oh father, I want you to carry out and go ahead with this command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to sacrifice me, because you will find me indeed to be amongst the steadfast ones. You will find me to be amongst the patient ones. I won't do anything, to stop you in carrying out the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So Ismail alayhi salam now, who's the son, the young boy, he says to his father, do one thing though before you do this. His father says, what is that? His father says, what is that? He says, tie my arms and tie my legs so I can't move. And then I want you to blindfold yourself, so that you can't see me when you are going to slaughter me. So when you are going to place the blade over my neck, you might basically change your mind because you're my dad. And I don't want you to change your mind. Why? Because this is the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So I want you to blindfold yourself so you don't see me in a state of suffering. So Prophet Ibrahim ﷺ took a cloth, put it around his eyes, blindfolded himself, and then he took the knife. And what he believes to be his son Ismail, he slits the throat. And now, when he takes the blindfold off, what does Ibrahim ﷺ see? Ibrahim ﷺ sees that his son Ismail is standing next to him, and in fact, what he had just done is, he had sacrificed an animal. And this animal, and then he got quite confused in the moment. He thought, what's happened? How did this happen? Did I disobey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? And just in that moment when he was thinking this, he heard Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talk to him. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala convinced him to say that, oh Ibrahim, you didn't fail, you passed the test. And you passed the test, which is why I replaced your son Ismail with an animal from heavens. And this basically, brothers, is the story, and this is the reason why we carry out the act of Qurbani. This is why we give the sacrifice, just during this period. But this is not where I want to finish my talk though. I want to stop here, and I want all the youngsters, all the brothers and sisters to think about this story. Let it sink for a moment. And ask yourself, what does this story mean? What does it teach us? What are the lessons that we can pull away from this story and apply in our daily lives? And in thinking about this, there were three things that stood out to me. This story teaches us, number one, that we will be tested in this life. What does it teach us? It teaches us that we will be tested by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And what we must remember is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in another verse in the Quran, He says, وَلَنَبْلُوَنَّكُمْ بِشَيْءٍ مِّنَ الْخَوْفِ وَالْجُوعِ وَنَقْصٍ مِّنَ الْأَمْوَالِ وَالْأَنفُسِ وَالثَّمَرَاتِ وَبَشِّرِ الصَّابِرِينَ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, and indeed we will test you through fear. We will test you in allowing you to experience hunger. We will allow you to experience loss of wealth. We will test you through the loss of lives. We will test you through the loss of business, and indeed there are glad tidings for the patient ones. I want you to think about this verse, brothers and sisters, because when we think about this verse, the first basically thing that I said to you was that what does the story of Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam teach us? And what did I say? The first thing that it teaches us is that we will be tested by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then Allah ta'ala in another part of the verse tells us that in this world that we live in, we will go through poverty, we will go through hunger, we will experience the loss of life, and we will see the loss of our wealth. We will also experience the loss of health. Now, most recently there's been this documentary that's been streamed on BBC, and it's called Bradford on Duty. And if you haven't watched it, I think it's a good documentary to watch because it gives you a real insight of some of the challenges and the problems in our communities and in Bradford at large and in general. And what we find is that Bradford unfortunately has one of the highest rates of deprivation. And when we talk about deprivation, one of the key things that we're talking about is poverty. What are we talking about? Poverty. And when a person is inflicted in poverty, what do they do in the community that we look around ourselves? They turn towards drugs, they turn towards alcohol, they turn towards addiction, they turn towards gangs, they turn towards cars, they turn towards anything and everything that gives them a sense of belonging, that gives them purpose, that gives them identity. And this is something that's really a big problem in Bradford, in particularly. It's a growing problem. There's more and more youngsters, there's more and more young people who are involved in this type of activity, in the consumption of drugs and alcohol, which then leads to mental health problems, which then leads to the breakup of families, which then leads to criminal activities, which then at large causes problems in the whole of community. Now, if we as a Muslim Ummah think that, you know what, nobody in my family is involved in drugs, so it's not my problem, someone else is involved in drugs, so it's their family problem, that's the wrong attitude. We as Muslims have to consider ourselves as a collective family and as a collective body and as a single unit. Until we do not consider this to be a problem that is a problem of our own, until then we cannot tackle these kind of issues. So my message to the youngsters here is that the story of Prophet Ibrahim ﷺ teaches us three things. And the first thing is that it teaches us that we will be tested. The second thing that it teaches us is that we have to put our trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's the key, I think, lesson of this story. Until we do not learn to put our trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we will be inflicted with azmaish, with parshanis, with difficulties and everything. Now let me tell you something very important, brothers and sisters, and particularly the young audience here. Sometimes in life, we plan that I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, I'm going to do this, that and the other. But things don't actually happen the way we quite expect them to. Things don't quite happen the way we want them to. But we must always remember to never give up. We must always remember to never give up and to know that God does not make mistakes in His plans. Sometimes when accidents happen or things happen in our lives, so for example, you younger audience here, I'm assuming you will be at school or college. So say for instance, you've got an exam that's coming up and you've really revised hard for this exam. But what's happened is that you've not got the numbers that you wanted, you've not passed, you've not got the percentage mark that you wanted. Does that mean then you give up? Does that then mean that you say, well, you know what, sod this, forget it. You know what, I'm going to start smoking, I'm going to join a gang, I'm going to just start, watching TV and playing games all day long, I'm not going to listen to my parents. Does that mean that's what you should do? No. What should you do? You should say, it's okay, I did my best, and Allah will create an opening for me, and I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing. Let me tell you something very important. Some of the most successful people in the world, they didn't get the success because it came to them. They had to work really hard for it. And sometimes things happen in their lives that they didn't even expect, and it almost seemed in their success story, it was an accident that just happened. Let me give you a very good example of this. Muhammad Ali. Who knows who Muhammad Ali is here? So you all know who Muhammad Ali is, yeah? So Muhammad Ali, did you know something? When he was a young boy, he was 11 years old. And what was it that took him into boxing? What inspired him? What led the path for him to go and start boxing and become a world champion? It wasn't his mom and dad who took him by the hand and said, let's take you to the boxing. He was riding his bike one day and he left his bike parked, and him and his brother went to the shopping mall. It was like a fun fair. So they went to the fun fair, they had fun, they got candy floss and everything. They come back and guess what? The bicycle's gone. Then what happens to Muhammad Ali? Ali basically gets really angry, gets really upset. He goes around thinking, who stole my bike? Who stole my bike? So he goes around everywhere in the local community, and then he goes downstairs into this basement, and that's where he sees a police officer who's training young boys how to box. And he goes to the police officer, can I tell you something? He goes, what? He says, somebody stole my bike, and you know what, when I find that person, I'm gonna whoop him. And the police officer goes, but for you to whoop him, you firstly need to know how to fight, you need to know how to box. So that's when Muhammad Ali, and that is how Muhammad Ali discovered boxing. So my point is here, that did Muhammad Ali, when he left his home that morning, was it part of his plan that my bike's going to get stolen today? Was it? No. Absolutely not. He didn't even have the thought that his bike's going to get stolen. But guess what? The fact that his bike got stolen, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created an opening for him, and through that opening, Muhammad Ali stayed focused and he went and became a great world champion. So my message to you brothers and sisters is this, that in life, just because something doesn't quite happen the way you expect it to happen, don't lose hope and don't give up on yourself, and don't think that it's the end of the world and you know what, I'm going to give up on myself. No, stay focused, work hard, and then keep going, and one day inshallah you'll be successful. And the last basically point of this story which I'd like to mention is this, that this story of Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam teaches us that sacrifice is a very important thing in Islam. Sacrifice is a very important tradition in Islam. Who knows what sacrifice means? What does it mean? Good. Sacrifice is when you give up something that is really that you desire. Especially when you're growing up, when you're 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17 years of age, there'll be a lot of things in the world that you'll want to do. You'll want to basically do a lot of wrong things. But is it okay for you to do them wrong things? No. You have to remember that you have to make a sacrifice and then only will you get the good things in life. And that's what Prophet Ibrahim Islam's story teaches us. It teaches us that until we don't sacrifice for what is right, we can't ever have true happiness. So, my brothers and my sisters in Islam and Iman, I would like to finish on that note by just saying this, that when we sacrifice an animal, what do we do with the meat? Who can tell me from the young audience, what do we do with the meat? The meat of the animal that we sacrifice, what do we do with it? Okay, that's a very interesting point. So the meat of the animal, what we do is we share it out, we distribute that. What does it tell us about sacrifice then? It tells us a sacrifice is something that is supposed to help other people. A sacrifice is something that shouldn't only just benefit you, but it should benefit at large the whole world and at large the society. So I guess the lesson that we learn from the story of Prophet Ibrahim is this, that our presence on this world should make the world a better place. Our presence on this world should make the world a better place. So we shouldn't want to just live to earn a living. We should try and live a life to make a difference. And this is why the great Muhammad Ali, in one of his famous quotes, he says, that service to humanity is the rent that you pay for your room on earth. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us the tawfiq to act upon what has been said. Wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin.